All right, Shana Tova, everybody. Happy New Year. The sun just went down here in West Virginia. We're on the East Coast time, in case you didn't know. So we're at Temple 420. They call me Pastor Craig X, and I'm going to burn a little hemp here. This is how we rock at Temple 420. Let in the smoke, carry our prayers, saying, hey, Father, please bless us that what we talk about here in the next few minutes on this Temple 420 Days of Awe. We're in the 10 days of awe right now until Yom Kippur on the 7th of October. So it's coming right up. Let's let that fragrant herb bless us, bless the air, and all you guys listening. Okay. I can maybe even take off my hat since I'm not reading anything. Take off my glasses since I'm not reading anything. I just can see myself better. I am Pastor Craig X. A lot of people know me as Craig X Rubin, which is my actor name. Rubin is our family name. Reuben comes from the Hebrew letters Rosh Ben Nun, similar to Rabbi, which would be Rosh Ben Yid. I'm at my house and I hear someone making noise outside there. I'm not sure what that is. It could be Mark scraping stuff off the walls in the church. So we are in a historic church in Wheeling, West Virginia. It's called the Aldersgate Church. I bought this place a couple years ago, and now they're trying to take it from us. I only use hemp now, and we only sell hemp for our I guess at our gift shop to support our ministry. And so they're not trying to arrest us like they did last time when we were providing medical marijuana in the state of California to patients with doctor's notes. And then we went to court and they're like, you can't talk about medical marijuana. So now they're saying they can tax us. None of the other churches in town are taxed. I don't know any other church in the country that's taxed. But our church, taxable. And we're happy to pay income tax when we make income. We're not trying to be tax-free, but we want to just be consistent, like Donald Trump. When they asked him, hey, did you take that write-off of $960 million? And he's like, yeah, I did, and so did every single one of Hillary Clinton's donors. And he named a couple of them. He goes, I'm not going to name any more because they're not famous, and I don't want to make them famous. So, we're trying to do the same thing. We're trying to make sure that we are not taxed unfairly and taxed right out of existence. Otherwise, they could tax any church right out of existence. So it's been a struggle, and it could happen. And like I said, I could end up homeless. And if it happens, I'm not going to be like, oh, boo-hoo, poor me. I'm going to be like, okay, God, what's next? So, and I think that is the key to being a Christian. If you're going to put your faith and be justified by your faith and live by faith, then you have to be willing to accept the consequences of what happens. So we have been studying in our Bible here the book of Revelation. We've been talking about the four horsemen of the apocalypse specifically, which is Revelation 6. I think it starts at 6:2, would be the white horse that comes to conquer and conquers the world with the corona, a crown, and a bow, a toxon, a simple face cloth. I grabbed my sweatshirt and the talit. Okay, so, anyway, the talit has talis at the end, these things and I wear these on my pants, not sometimes, all the times, on the four corners, because this is supposed to represent all the laws that are in the book of Deuteronomy, I believe, the Levitical laws. Maybe it's in the book of Leviticus, hello. And also, just to remind you of the Ten Commandments. So in my mind, I'm just thinking of the Ten Commandments. And what did Jesus say about the Ten Commandments? They said, hey, Rabbi, which are the most important commandments? And obviously, he goes right to the first one. He says, you only have me, your God. You love him with all your heart, all your might, and all your soul. Not him as Jesus, but he was saying God, the Father, Abba. And the second one is you should love your neighbor as yourself. And all the other commandments hang upon those two, which is true. Don't kill, don't steal, don't commit adultery, don't get jealous or covet other people's donkeys and asses and women and children and lands and whatever. Everything you have because it's what you were meant to have. And if you think you're meant to have more, then good. Work hard and get it in an honest way that's in alignment with your values, and hopefully your values, if you're a Christian, are in alignment with the Ten Commandments. So, as I mentioned yesterday, I was upset with my father, and I'm like, I'm going to read the New Testament. So that's what got me to become a Christian in July of 2003. And in 2005, we started this Temple 420 online ministry. And in 2006, we started a physical church, which was on Hollywood Boulevard. And we tried to help people who were spiritually lacking and engaged in unsavory businesses and doing bad things. And we tried to help a lot of people. We brought a lot of Jewish people to the Messiah, which was awesome. And what was interesting, and I think I started to touch on this yesterday, was we did the Old Testament on Saturday and the New Testament on Sunday. And surprisingly, the Christians came to hear the Old Testament, and the Jewish people came on Sunday to learn about Jesus in the New Testament. And I think that's because people, and they drove a long way, like a lot of people drove hours and hours. And I'm decent at this, but I'm not the best preacher in the world. But I think I created an environment where people felt at home and comfortable and could relate to me and could relate to the stories when I was telling them. Like, for example, I was thinking of the story of Sampson, and my pastor, Bishop Williams, at the family church in Pasadena one time asked my 10-year-old son, so what do you think about Sampson? And Chris, that's my son, Christopher Avi, his Hebrew name Avi Ben Israel. He says, Samson was a liar. And he goes, really? He's, one of the judges, one of the most famous judges, and killed all these Philistines and helped his people. And he says, well, why do you say that? He goes, well, first, he married a woman who wasn't approved of by God, but he said, in my own eyes. And that's where the real problem starts, because the very first sin, the original sin, is when Adam and Eve think like, well, God said this, but that little serpent, he said that, we could just blame him. And so in my eyes, this isn't going to happen. So when you start thinking in your own eyes and ignoring the commandments of God, that's when you get in trouble. So, getting back to the other story, if I can remember. It's the one thing about being a stoner church, you're sometimes like off on one tangent, then back to another. Okay, so we were talking about original sin. For the life of me, I can't remember, but it'll come back to me in a minute, or it won't. I'll listen to the tape later, and then I'll be like, oh yeah, okay, I'll touch on it tomorrow. So hopefully you'll tune back in. But I wanted to focus on how we got here, and how I personally got here was starting with our church in Hollywood, and I got in trouble. So it was very difficult, and even though I was an early Christian, at first I was a little angry and bitter. And that's how I found my bishop, who I had mentioned earlier, Bishop Donnie Williams, who was the coolest guy. I mean, still is a cool guy. And he was in the Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee. He was a champion, a world champion martial artist before it was like a thing. So that's what I want to tell you guys. Get strong, get tough, train yourselves right now, because we're about to go through difficult times. And, oh, that's right, we were talking about Sampson, because he's a tough guy. So Bishop Williams asked my son, what do you think of Sampson? He said, Sampson is a liar. So Sampson married a bad woman because he chose a woman in his own eyes that was good, but not in his parents' eyes. But he made his father negotiate the deal with Delilah's father. And they negotiated the deal, and he took her as a wife. But she was not loyal to her husband. Red flags were everywhere. This bitch was ruining his credit, driving his car around town. No. What happened was she was still working for the Philistines against him. And because he was an Israelite, they wanted to know the power of his strength. And he was also a Nazarene. And part of the Nazarene code is to never cut your hair. That's not why I'm doing this. I am working out and getting stronger, but it's not from my hair, even though I did believe that as a little kid. The Nazarites, I'm doing it because some asshole during COVID wouldn't cut my hair without a mask, and I was like, I'm going to grow long hair then. But the Nazarites grew their hair long, and that was just part of who they were. And Samson had been prophesied, the longer his hair grew, the stronger he would get. So he married Delilah, and as I said, she was not looking out for her husband as women should, as a wife should. She was looking out for her people, the Philistines, and that's why you shouldn't marry someone who's not equally yoked to you, who's not of the same belief, the same faith, so you can make sure you raise your children properly, and you can make sure she's going to support you so you grow together as a family. Now, she kept asking him, where does your strength come from? And he's like, oh, tie 7 reeds around my wrist, tie 7 bowstrings, tie 7 new whatever, just making stuff, lying. Just like my son said, he was a liar. But you know how women can be. Just nagging, 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 nagging. And finally, what are you going to do? Tell that biatch the truth, right? He's going to say, all right, Delilah, here's where my strength comes from. Comes from my hair. If you cut my hair, I'll be weak. Because every time they'd tie him up, and he'd be like, fuck that. Should have known, never trust this chick. Get out of there right then in that relationship, right? No. Samson loved her to his own detriment in some way. And when he fell asleep, she cut his hair. And they came and tied him up, and he couldn't free himself. And they blinded him. They burned his eyes out. Could you imagine the pain of that, burning your eyes out? So he was blinded. And like they tortured him. Imagine, like back in the day, you read about the Mayans taking one of their enemy kings, and they held him prisoner, and whenever a holiday came out, they're like, we're going to torture this guy and shred off a piece of him and kill him. And they would make the other city-state where they had captured the king from pay him to keep from killing him, just to keep him alive, so he could be tortured. I mean, it was just a horrific, horrific thing. So imagine the barbarity of the Philistines. They tied him up, made fun of him, spit on him, probably punched him, hit him, kicked him. He had killed a lot of them. So, as he's tied up in this building and people are all there and it's a big holiday and they drag him out, they chain him to the pillars of this building. But they didn't realize over time his hair had grown back and he had regained his strength. And so he started swaying back and forth and using his strength, and he pulls down the building on top of the Philistines, and he kills more Philistines in that one moment than he did in his whole life. And the Philistines have always been a problem for the Israelites. In fact, when Rome finally destroyed the Israelites, not in 70 AD when they destroyed the temple, but I think it was like 123 AD, after the revolution of Simon Bar Kokhba, one of the other false prophets who pretended like he was the Messiah, had everyone cut their fingers, like do some weird shit. Some cult ritualistic blood sacrifice type stuff, and he lost. And I think this is when Titus carried off, oh no, that might have been in 70 AD when Titus carried off all the riches of the temple to Rome. But this is when they killed the rest of the slaves, they salted the ground. This is when the land became desolate. So there's always false Christ, there's always Antichrist. And I think part of the reason is because God keeps people in the ready. I just touched my computer. I'm trying to make it higher so you can see my sign, give a little respect to the country. And I think that's what's going on right now, is we are in a spiritual war, a battle between good and evil, between the godly and the ungodly. And it's important to understand the book, the Bible, and some of the stories in there, like that great story of Sampson we talked about today, so that you can relate to these stories and see how they relate to us in everyday life. So this is the end of the first day, the beginning of the second day after the new year. We waited until the moon could be seen, and some people were asking, well, why did everyone else celebrate Rosh Hashanah earlier? Rosh, like Reuben, Rosh being head, Hashanah, the year, head of the year. So why did we wait until the new moon? Because that's what the Bible says to do. And now we're in 10 days of awe, where we're supposed to be repentant, reflect on all the things we've done wrong in this past year, and ask God's forgiveness. And then to atone for all those things, we have a fasting day. No food, no water for Yom Kippur for 24 hours. And I did that last year for the first time. Every year I'm like, oh, I'm going to do it. I try to do it. And every year I forget and I eat a little bit. And last year, every time I went to the fridge, it was like God reminded me. It was really nice. So I made that commitment. And I just knew I could survive 24 hours. I wasn't going to die. I had it here if I needed. And at the end of those 24 hours, I was like, dang, I feel strong. I feel better. I got the willpower. I can do it. Thank you. And I didn't all ego out, but I was like, thanks, God. Thanks for helping me out. I appreciate it, because I was weak, and every time I went to the fridge, I was like, oh, I forgot. And I kind of wanted to eat, but God went, Anyways, you guys have a blessed day. I'm trying to get this now on Vimeo, Rumble, and YouTube. Hopefully I won't get kicked off anytime soon. I'll see you tomorrow. 49 straight days. It's going to be difficult, but we're going to do it just like last year. God bless. Where's the button?